John, thank you so much for taking the time to meet with me. It's a real honor and a privilege. You have worked in IP in Nigeria for many years. How is the current COVID-19 situation affecting the legal sector in general, and which are the major changes you've seen in the last few months?
I think the major changes have a lot to do with electronic communications going virtual, with interactions with clients and with the courts. I think that's really the major impact the crisis has initiated. So we're seeing a lot of people, law firms, for instance, functioning virtually, like my firm, SP Ajibade and Co. We've been holding most of our meetings electronically in-house. And most of our meetings, we normally hold practice meetings on Fridays on a weekly basis. We now do this virtually because that's the only way you can do it remotely. So a lot of firms are doing that, and also I'm sure reaching out to their clients electronically as well. We normally put up articles on our resource page, and we're doing more of this now because a lot of our lawyers are now free. They're trying to, more free time is available for them to write articles and on topical issues, especially the impact of COVID-19 on legal practice. And a lot of the topics we've addressed are available. We've dealt with issues, for instance, having to do with data protection and privacy. We've dealt with intellectual property issues. We've dealt with corporate finance, capital market issues. It's a broad spectrum of issues that need to be addressed, but they all hinge around electronic communication, virtual practice of law, which I believe is the next stage in legal administration and legal practice. The courts are also reluctantly, but they're compelled to introduce electronic filings as well.
Right. So are you saying that in Nigeria, were you specifically focusing on Nigeria when you had mentioned that the entire legal spectrum is moving more electronically as well, both on the court side and on the law firm side?
Yes, that's it's been in the offing. A lot of indications, for instance, back in 2000 and I believe it's 2018, my firm hosted the first legal hackathon on the continent. And most of the participants came up with programs and apps having to do with electronic filings, especially in the criminal justice system. And I know the Nigerian Bar Association has also been experimenting with it, even hosting database of lawyers online, because it cuts across most of our dealings. Everything needs to be migrated online. But it's been very slow in taking hold, especially with the regular court system, having available a solid, reliable electronic filing system so that lawyers and litigants can submit their applications electronically. That is something that has now come to the forefront of affairs. It needs to be addressed now, and the courts are actually experimenting with it because we don't really know how long this crisis is going to drag out. We've been at home now for almost 5 weeks, and most cases are not being heard. So I know the Chief Justice of Nigeria had issued a directive on this a couple of weeks ago at the outset of the lockdown, and very recently the Chief Judge of the Lagos State High Court, that's the General High Court with broad jurisdiction, has also introduced virtual hearings for cases. But also recently, the Federal High Court, which has jurisdiction over intellectual property matters, just issued a directive saying that nothing of the sort should be introduced until there's a directive from the National Judicial Council, which is also experimenting, looking at a broad response to this crisis, so that we don't have piecemeal reactions here and there. But the important thing is that it's not coming to the fore. Everybody has to contend with it because we can't all just fold our hands and sit down. As a developing economy, it's been very bad for us economically. The currency is losing value, the dollar. People are desperate. People are hungry. People need care. So something needs to be done, and life needs to go on.
So you had mentioned regarding the legal profession in Nigeria that it seems like there's a backlog and they may not be advanced as other countries regarding being able to utilize technology. Is there anything that we can do to potentially, like I know in other parts, for example, the U.S. or in other parts of the world, that they may be more advanced technologically? Is there anything that we can reach out to them and say, hey, can you help us during this time and get these technologies up and running in Nigeria?
I believe so. I'm sure, for instance, as an example, I know the WIPO is assisting the trademark registry with a lot of new technologies, new age technologies, especially with creating a database of filing system. It's been a very major problem, the trademark and patent registry, that everything, at least most of the transactions are done manually. I know the WIPO has been assisting the registry in generating an electronic database. It's still ongoing. It's been on for a couple of years now. We hope that this will be wrapped up expeditiously, especially with this crisis now and the impact it's had. Because it affects everything. Trademarks need to be published, for instance, after it's accepted for registration, to enable third parties to oppose if necessary. So if you're not able to publish regularly, because people are not filing applications, doing searches as they need to do very quickly, it impacts on everybody. All stakeholders are affected. The major problem is that, for instance, if you need to do an availability search to see if your mark is available for registration, you may need to do it manually because the electronic system is not fully up and running. There is some appearance of an electronic database, but it's not comprehensive. So if if you don't have an electronic database, it slows down the work you're doing at the registry. The work of your clients to protect their trademarks in the proper way. We're hoping that things like this, initiatives like this by the WIPO will continue. I understand also that the Nigerian Copyright Commission is also liaising with a few international bodies regarding collective management, collective administration of copyrighted materials, especially like international collecting societies in Europe, to help also with managing collective administration of copyrights in Nigeria. So it is an area that we need to explore a little bit more. For instance, maybe facing with the USPTO, how they have been able to address some of the problems they have, how they can assist us with the technologies. But it's something that I think needs the collective support of everybody, the lawyers, the practitioners, as well as the agency, in seeing how we can make this work.
Right. Would you say that there's also a factor of the internal bureaucracy based in Nigeria? Is this more of an international community isn't coming in to support at this time?
Well, in certain areas, yes. For instance, in copyright administration, there are a few uncertainties there. The collecting societies that have been functioning, especially in terms of musical works and sound recordings, there seems to be a little bit of a crisis there. Things are a bit unstable. We had represented MTN in an action filed by the Copyright Society of Nigeria for the protection of works belonging to members of the collecting society. And even though the matter was resolved through mediation, the COSAN, the collecting society, was suspended subsequently due to internal crisis. And this has been something that has been pending for a while. It hasn't really been addressed. There's a need for for better regulation, better monitoring of collecting societies, better accountability of monies, for instance, collected for distribution on behalf of members. So it finally got to a head, I think it was last year or 2 years ago, and that collecting society was suspended. And it's created a lot of uncertainty for members. How do they access their revenue, their royalties for the works that they have created? So I think these and other issues may actually drive away well-meaning third parties who want to assist because they feel we need to get our house in order. I understand that the NCC, that's the Nigerian Copyright Commission, has set up some committee to address that, resolve the issues, because COSAN, for instance, holds most, because it was like a monopoly for a number of years, so most of the artists belong to it. So if you have it suspended, even though there's a new one functioning, the Musical Copyright Society of Nigeria, parties are still, members of the association are still losing a lot of money. And they need to have this resolved very quickly. So yes, I agree with you. There are bureaucratic issues, there are internal governance issues that need to be addressed. There are enforcement issues that need to be addressed. There are also issues having to do with statutory regulation. The laws are still not up to date. They're not optimized yet. I've attended a lot of workshops, seminars, and trainings where I've made propositions and recommendations for how we can optimize the system to make it more effective for copyright and rights holders.
Interesting. And as a partner and head of IP and Technology Law Department at SBA Ajibade and Company, you organize and implement growth strategies. How is the current situation impacting this line of work in particular?
Interesting. It hasn't been too damaging, except for instance, in terms of maybe attending IP seminars and conferences like INTA, for instance, the International Trademark Association's premier annual conference was supposed to have taken place in Singapore this year. But the coronavirus made it impossible for us to meet as usual. It's a very important IP conference for IP practitioners, from around the globe. A minimum of like 9,000 people coming together to discuss issues having to do with trademark protection and IP generally. That hasn't held. It's also an opportunity for practitioners to get to meet and hopefully drum up work, drum up clientele in the field. So it's still in abeyance. And the last communication we got was that it may hold in the United States towards the end of the year, but that's still up for grabs. We're not sure if actually it will hold this year. So that's like a loss, and also a loss in terms of revenue. We have, for instance, an opposition ruling that was delivered against our client before the crisis started, and we're supposed to have filed an appeal for judicial review. And that application is still being held up because we can't approach the courts for now. We're hoping to be able to seek extension of time to do that once the lockdown is lifted. So in terms of growth of the practice, it's impacted us in terms of being able to create more work, drum up more work. If you're looking at it in terms of physically getting to meet prospective clients, which is always an advantage, because they read about you on your website, but they want to put a face to it. and it gives them comfort. They talk to you to see if you're knowledgeable and if you can handle the work. So we don't have that opportunity because of the crisis to meet, but there's also the opportunity to reach out to prospective clients electronically, as I said, and we've stayed in touch with our clientele and we've updated them on what's going on with their trademarks, with their patents and inventions. And if any renewals need to be filed, we can always do this once the lockdown is lifted. There is a bit of sluggishness in the growth of the practice, but I'm hoping that this will be resolved as soon as this crisis is over.
John, you're familiar with the U.S. jurisdiction. You have worked in New York for over 2 years. Your bar admissions include the United States Supreme Court, the state of New York, the Nigerian Supreme Court. Do you see the COVID-19 situation having a financial impact on IP stakeholders in Nigeria and the U.S.? And if so, would you say the impact is more noticeable in one over the other?
I think it's relative. And I'll answer it by saying that most of the intellectual property rights that are protected in sub-Saharan Africa usually owned by multinationals, in patents, for instance, and even in trademarks. So in terms of that, I think that for stakeholders, I'm sure it's been really difficult. It's been very difficult because of loss of revenue. The market has crashed. Money is available for research and development, obviously may have tanked. So I believe, for instance, in the United States, it's actually very evident, very obvious that things are not looking up. In sub-Saharan Africa, it's a different ball game. What my experience has been that it's been very, very harsh for startups. New companies struggling to gain a headway in the industry. I believe they are badly hit, especially in terms of availability of funding for most of the innovations. And I see that as being a big problem because it's taking them a long time maybe to get to where they are now, and then the rug is pulled from underneath them. The little resources that they have been able to garner is probably gone. They've had to redirect their funding to other things just to survive. So there are two scenarios. In developing countries, it's more of subsistence, it's more of basic needs. In advanced economies, you're talking about multinational companies, they can absorb a lot of a shock, but they are also impacted. So I mean, that's the way I look at it. For us, I've had to deal with a lot of startups in Nigeria. And I know that the problems they have is they don't have people guiding them on how to protect their intellectual property rights. And we give that to them freely in the hope that we can grow with them as a practice when they finally set up. But they normally are unable to commercialize their inventions because they don't have the resources to do that. And the impact of COVID-19 has been very devastating, I can imagine, for startups and for newcomers to the market.
Right. So, John, it seems like you're directly involved to try to really boost the innovation side in Nigeria. Some of the younger people, get them inventing things, and now this crisis seems to have really slowed that down, and really slowed down the economy at this time.
It has. We've, for instance, we've had a couple of youngsters that have come in to discuss their ideas with us over last year. And I think in January we had meetings with them. And some of them have like maybe computer programs that they want to bring to the market, things, applications. And we've helped them, prepare the specifications and claims for the patent applications. It's something that most people are unaware of how to prepare these documentations in Nigeria. Even the lawyers are hard pressed to do this. So with the little skill we have, most Nigerian practitioners are not scientists. In the United States, for instance, for you to practice patent law, you need to be knowledgeable in the core sciences. And apart from admission bar, you also need to be admitted to the patent bar. And so the patent practitioners in the United States, for instance, are scientists. In Nigeria, you don't have that requirement. Anybody, any lawyer or patent agent can act on behalf of clients at the registry, because we don't have an examination system. So patents in Nigeria are just submitted based on documentations that you have. So it's not as demanding as it is in the United States. But at the same time, local practitioners don't have the requisite training to be able to prepare the necessary specifications and claims for their clients. So with the knowledge and the training that I have, and my colleagues in the department, we've been able to help out a lot of these startups to prepare their specifications and claims, and to file a proper application at the Patent and Designs Registry. And it's been very fulfilling. In addition to that, we've also been able to extend very steep discounts for them, to encourage them to protect their rights.
And is there anything else you would like to add that reflects how IP has been impacted by the global reality that we're currently living in?
I believe the takeaway from that people need to come together and work together, exchange ideas. It need not be antithetical to the idea of protecting intellectual property rights. I think in some areas you need to be able to give and take. IP protection involves a balancing of rights, the rights of the owners as well as the rights of the users. But coming back home, for developing economies that are still struggling, I believe that this is the time for governments, African governments, to come up with welfare packages. Social security. I mean, you have social security benefits, you have unemployment in the United States. As of today, I think over 30 million people have applied for unemployment benefits. You don't have things like that in Africa. And it's really difficult at times like this when there's no cushion. It's all done haphazardly. That a lot of people are left without some assistance when they really need it most. So I believe this is an opportunity, is an eye-opener. And I hope there'll be an opportunity for us to take advantage of what needs to be corrected, and to make those adjustments against future occurrences.